Good morning. You are viewing GMT. Good morning, Tobago. I'm your host, Natalie Sealy-Richardson, and it's always a pleasure to spend my Friday morning with you. This morning, we talk all things budget. That is the conversation, whether you're in the taxi or at work, even at home. And joining us this morning is Dr. Vanus James, economist, and we will continue to have that conversation this morning as we examine different features presented in the budget and what it means for us as Twin Island Republic and, of course, Tobago. Dr. James, good morning.
Good morning, Natalie.
And, of course, welcome once again to Tobago Updates Television, GMT this morning. And, of course, yes, and as I mentioned, a lot of voices are sharing their opinions, and I heard the Prime Minister describe this budget as one for the people. And some of the key highlights that she, amongst others, are using to support this description would be, of course, the reduction of the super fuel by $1, the creation of the 5 million Women's Health Fund to deal with period poverty, the creation of the $475 million employment fund, and I think that goes along with another figure that is supposed to help transition the URP workers, etc. And, things like that. Do you agree with that statement? And let's begin there, that this is a budget for the people.
Well, yeah, I mean, one can agree with the Prime Minister's characterization, but I will have a different way to interpret that because of the system of government we work with. We run an authoritarian system of government, and the population really operates as a kind of set of bystanders watching the cabinet do its thing. And in that context, waiting for goodies to drop from the cabinet's table. And if you operate on that basis and you don't have to really take responsibility for what the government does, then you are happy when you get a $1 decline in the price of gas or any of all of those kinds of things. But you don't do development that way. The authoritarian system of government ultimately has proven over 70 years to be a failure.
Right. And of course, there's the other side to the conversation where, people are not seeing it as a budget for the people, but rather one as it gives, it takes away from us. There's the addition of the electricity surcharge for commercial industrial customers. You have the 2026 increased NIS rates. You have the removal of the subsidy from the 100-pound gas. And not just restaurants or food places use it, but some homeowners use it as well. When you look at this part of the budget or these features, is it that we have to lose a lot more?
Well, as I said, given the system we're running, what you're doing is you're watching cabinet at work. The cabinet is juggling to solve fundamental problems that we have. You have to find a way to finance the budget, and in particular finance the deficit component of the expenditure program. And so government might try to please people by giving the $1 and all of the period poverty solutions and all of those kinds of things. But on the other hand, it has to find a way to finance, and that means you have to impose higher customs duties in effect and all of these other things that you see in the budget. It's juggling, and it is juggling. It is not the population that is involved in a process of working out the solutions.
Right.
So you kind of do not have a people responsible for what the government is doing. It's the government doing its thing. That ultimately is not a good approach to the way we want to solve our problems, but that's what we have.
Right. And of course, a budget is a plan. How does the government deal with changes to come? Because you mentioned it's a deficit budget, of course. The budget presentation was pegged on a barrel of oil at 73.25 US, I think, and gas at 4.25, I believe, right? And
Right.
we know that the numbers are nowhere there currently and hasn't been for a while. So how does government deal with this? Because the figures are based on pegging income, part of the income or revenue to be raised with those figures. What if we never get there? What are we looking at?
Well, I mean, the budget is constructed from the revenue side in two components. One component relies heavily on those projected prices for oil and gas, and that's the take from the energy sector, 11.54 billion dollars of revenues.
Right,
If you don't realize those prices, what's going to happen is that that take will fall dramatically, maybe 9 billion, 8 billion, depending on the level to which the prices rise, if they do rise.
right.
And that would add to the deficit in effect, and that would force the minister to adjust, maybe on the fly or adjust midterm as the law allows him to do. So in the end, that is the fundamental risk we are running. That's one half of the story. The other half of that story is that when you do not realize the projected prices on which you link the budget, the rest of the economy depends heavily on foreign exchange inflows from the energy sector. And when that foreign exchange doesn't come in, several things happen. The import cover is likely to decline. This is an import intensive economy, and that's going to spell trouble. You remember, we had 5.4 months now of import cover.
Right.
That's on the knife edge, as it were. So that's half of the problem. But the other half is that when the businesses can't get access to foreign exchange, effectively the output of the non-energy sector will fall. And when that falls, the revenue projected, the 45 or so billion dollars of revenue projected from that sector will also not be realized. And that's the conundrum we find ourselves in. And we have found ourselves in every decade from 1956.
And you as you made those comments, I can't help to think that we are in that place already, because you have a lot of businesses who are having a lot of issues getting foreign exchange to make their purchases to offer it for sale. And you hear the complaint, you see the banks every couple of months sending out notices saying your credit card limit on the US side is now less per month. You can only use this amount per day. And I know you have been a very strong advocate for diversification. Is diversification going to help us solve this? And again, when you were here last time we spoke, I did mention that this conversation seems to be never ending, because we've been hearing about it. But who really has the will to begin the process for us to come away from the dependency as the economy changes from this oil and gas, pegging so much of our revenue on the oil and gas industry? Because we see the changes dramatically throughout the world, and we may not be able to really, hone in as we used to years ago and said, yes, this is what we will get, and our economy is safe.
Well, let me respond to you this way. The fundamental responsibility for the country rests in the citizenry, not the government. And it's the people of Trinidad and Tobago who must ultimately push their parties, push their institutions, push in the election season, and so on, to force the collective, all of us acting together, to take on the fundamental problems we have, a big part of which is solved by the diversification agenda. But what the population has to understand is you cannot address the diversification problem as a people unless we cook up a system of government that allows all of us to bring information properly to the decision-making process. So over 70 years that I have watched it happen, governments have never moved in the direction of diversification, preferring to bet on the luck of oil and gas. Now, we've always known that you have to do it. All my life as an economist, we've known that. We've preached that, not
Right.
from me alone. I mean, economists before me were saying that. To get there, we have to make good policy. To make good policy, we have to reform the system of government. To get there, we have to tackle the problem the Prime Minister has promised to bring solutions to, which is the CPEP-URP type problem. We have a large pool of the labor force that is undereducated. That's an expression of the undercapitalization of the economy.
Right.
And you solve that problem with diversification. So all of those things tie to that. And then the Tobago economy cannot be developed unless we solve the diversification problem. Tobago itself is an expression of the non-diversified economy. You
Mm-hmm.
can't develop tourism in Tobago unless you push the development of exportable education, exportable healthcare, and so on. That's what diversification means in Trinidad and Tobago. That
Mm-hmm.
sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the end, what we have to have is a population that demands, in all the ways it can, that we set up the government to make sound policy to push in this direction. You cannot get down that road unless the government is set up properly. There is one dimension of that that is directly our responsibility. A big part of the entrepreneurship that will deliver exportable education, exportable healthcare in the right forms, exportable creative industries in the right forms, and so on. A big part of that entrepreneurship is not the private sector and it's not the central government or the THA, it's the communities. When you look at successful countries that have done this around the world, you see it in the local communities. In
Right.
Britain, you see it in London and Manchester, and that's the
Yes.
sort of thing you have to understand. So
Mm-hmm.
the citizenry all over the society in the communities must ultimately say, look, our turn has come for us to wake up and play our role as a big part of the entrepreneurship that will deliver diversification. And until we come to that as a society, we won't succeed. Unfortunately, you will wish your government well, as I do wish, say, this government well, and wish Dr. Rowley's government well. But ultimately, you fail because the system is cooked up for failure.
Right. And I'm listening to you, and I can't help but be a bit fearful because I think as a people, we are so comfortable where we are. And, to effect that change, I still ask the question, who is out there who will really rally the troops and effect change? But that's a conversation for another time. We have a few minutes left, and I want us to talk about the allocation coming to Tobago, the largest in its history. It's about 6.3% of the. It's an aggregate percentage of about 6.3% of the national budget. What's your view on that? Do you think that it was coming? Do you think that now Tobago is more empowered, or does it not really make a difference?
Same story. If you are going to make any sense of it, I mean, we've been raising the share of the revenues coming to government since before the THA, the new THA Act. I mean, from 1980, before 1980s was 1.2%. Now it's up to 5%. We have not achieved any development over that period. And when the minister announced the 5%, you will notice while the minister took the time to show that the government in Trinidad, meaning Dr. Rowley's government, performed badly, he didn't take the time to document the performance of the THA and the
Right.
Tobago economy. Because if you were to do that properly, what you would find is there is no development going on in Tobago. We're not exporting healthcare, we're not exporting education. Tourism is relying primarily on beach and events tourism. That's not going to do the job for us. We're not doing as we should with the carnival industries, extending them into film and video games and all of those kinds of things. We're just holding a fete every year, that sort
Right.
of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what you then learn from that, and when you look at the four successful countries in the Caribbean region, is that the minister has stayed away from a proper accounting of the performance of the Tobago economy. So that leaves Tobagonians now in euphoria, but with nobody to tell them, look, face the reality. You're just going to get money, spend it, and as Manley said, it would pass through Tobago like salts, and you will not end up with development. We have to put an end to that kind of game sometime in our history.
Right, and of course, as we look to close, I want you to comment. In the minister's presentation, he mentioned, and I can't remember the exact term now, but it was like investment in real estate, something like how unit trust would run. I can't remember the term now. I want you to comment on it because if my memory serves me right from researching, about 20 years ago in Tobago's, there was a document presented, I think, by a strategic committee with Dr. Anselm London, with Dr. Henry, I think even with Professor Julian. And something like that was developed in terms of 20 years ago that Tobago should develop. Tell us a little of how that will work in the national scheme of things.
Right. Well, I don't fully understand what the minister had in mind because he didn't
Right,
provide the elaboration. But what
right,
I know from the point of view of professional research is that Tobago, and maybe to a lesser extent Trinidad, but surely Tobago, will benefit and should put in place a land and housing trust that provides another avenue for citizens to accumulate assets that will serve them well in their retirement years. Uh, that's the same attitude you have to the solutions offered on the NIS. NIS provides citizens $3,000-4,000 a month when you retire. But if you understand how the practical world works, that's a peppercorn retirement income, and so what you have to do is invest in other measures, other developing other assets that will provide the kind of income you will need when you are no longer able to sell your labor power to make money. So
right,
all the land and housing trust idea is a great idea, but I don't know that that is what the minister had in mind. That's
right.
where they should be going in Trinidad, uh, beyond what is going on now with housing, and surely in Tobago, given the fact that young people will need access to housing assets, not just to live now, but as a source of income. And therefore, you have to build the kinds of assets and therefore the kind of tourism, the long stay tourism, that will allow those assets to generate income in your later years.
And let me just share with the viewers, it was called, or it is called, the establishment of a real estate investment trust. And with most budgets, we always have to wait to get the details to these programs, because what was the summary of the presentation is the government will establish a state-sponsored real estate investment trust in fiscal 2026, aimed at ownership of state assets and broadening public participation in national wealth creation. And it continues to say the REIT, which is the Real Estate Investment Trust, will include income-generating state properties such as land, office buildings, and commercial infrastructure, which will be transferred into a professionally managed portfolio.
Right.
Yeah?
Well, you have to know what that means,
Yes.
notwithstanding what you've read there,
Yes.
because the design is critical. I mean, in
Yes.
Jamaica, we've invested in building up the housing trust that has a particular design that's working well for them. But in the context of, say, Tobago, where we have so much land tenure issues and so on, you're going to have to do much more than a housing trust. So it's not merely that you have the trust. And secondly, in the context of Tobago, you're going to need to integrate it into a carefully crafted development banking facility to underscore opportunities for people to invest in the development program. So this is an important idea that the minister is opening up here, but much depends on how you design it in the context of the facts of your case.
And we just have a minute or so to wrap up. Again, going back to the giving and taking within the budget presentation, because I know many drivers rejoiced with their dollar decrease in the fuel. But I also noticed that, clearance of a shipping container increased by 100%. Some of the taxes that will impact business owners and manufacturers, taxes have gone up. And we know traditionally in the structure of a business, the cost factors in the end user's price, so that I'm thinking that business owners, of course, who are in business to make a profit, will therefore pass on that cost to the end users, the consumers. How should we As an economist, I want you to give us advice in terms of preparing for what is to come, as we wrap up this interview.
Right. Well, the fundamental principle underlying your reference to the customs duties and increased custom duties is that imports are inputs into production in Trinidad and Tobago. All imports, including imports of food, because that's what you use to sustain workers for them to go to work. So when you raise the cost of imports, you are raising the cost of production in the country, and that puts pressure especially on businesses at the margins, small businesses, and so on. If you're going to do that, you're going to have to take steps on the other hand to deal with the viability of the businesses that are going to come under pressure. I have not seen those kinds of steps in the budget. Let me also tie your question to the reduction in the cost of fuel. That's all good for the individual, but when you're thinking about the economy as a whole, if you add if that means that say $400 million of spending power will get into the hands of citizens, what they will do with that spending power is buy imports. And apart from the point I was making earlier about the rising cost of those imports, the other face of that is that it's going to be pressure on foreign exchange supplies. So simultaneously with doing those things, you have to be doing the things we need to increase our export earning capacity. That won't happen in the morning, but you need to put the program in place now. So 10, 15 years down the road, you could offset the consequences of raising the demand for imports in the current period. Until we get that kind of configuration right as a citizen, enjoy your dollar reduction and face the costs with some thought and maybe some prayers.
Advice taken. Thank you so much, Dr. James, for joining us this morning. And viewers, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And remember, it's our responsibility to keep updated. Don't just listen to sound bites in the public or just in a taxi. But the budget presentation is there. You have a lot of summaries coming out from professional institutions as well. And it's a good thing to get those documents, see it online and really be informed and understand how this budget can impact us, because it will impact like any other budget that's presented in this country. So thank you again, and you have a blessed day, Dr. James.
Thanks a lot, Natalie.
Viewers, we go for a quick break, and when we return, our next guest will join us in studio this morning, and we're talking to Minister Tricia Sobers.